David Wren stared at his phone, watching the voicemail play on repeat. "This is not how I imagined my Monday going." He sighed, dangling precariously from the side of the Empire State Tower, his legs flailing slightly in the cool night air. The rain pelted him, soaking his shirt and making his web strands glisten under the city lights. Below, the sounds of traffic and distant sirens filled the night, a stark contrast to the chaos he felt inside. "Come on, David. Think," he muttered, trying to recall the brief training he'd forced himself into over the past few months. His spider abilities were still a work in progress, an unintended gift or curse from the illegal experiments that had taken everything from him. He took a deep breath, focusing on the webbing he could produce from his wrists. Slowly, he began to pull himself up, but his inexperience showed. The web strands snapped back, sending him tumbling downward. Panic surged through him as he flailed, only to find himself stuck again, hanging upside down and exposed to the elements. Flashback. The fateful night. The scene shifted to a flashback of a bright laboratory filled with humming machines and anxious scientists. David's parents, both respected geneticists, were working late on a groundbreaking serum aimed at enhancing human abilities. They believed their research could usher in a new era of human potential. Unbeknownst to them, their lead scientist, Dr. Augustus Krieg, had other plans. Driven by greed and ambition, Krieg had been conducting unauthorized experiments, pushing the boundaries of ethics and safety. One evening, as David, only 10 years old, visited his parents at the lab, an accidental spill of the experimental serum mixed with volatile chemicals ignited a catastrophic explosion. David watched in horror as flames engulfed the room. His parents tried to shield him, but the blast was too powerful. When the smoke cleared, David stood alone amidst the wreckage, his body transformed by the serum. He had developed spider-like abilities: super strength, agility, and the ability to produce webbing. But the transformation came at a tremendous cost: the loss of his family and the burden of uncontrollable powers. Present day, a double life. Back on the skyscraper, David finally manages to secure a web strand to a ledge, pulling himself up with a mix of relief and frustration. He wipes the rain from his face, glancing around to ensure he's not been spotted. After a few tense moments, he carefully climbs down the building, using his webbing to navigate the slick surfaces. David's life since that tragic night has been a delicate balance between his mundane job and his quest for vengeance. By day, he's a tech support specialist at a nondescript office, assisting frustrated customers with computer issues. His colleagues see him as quiet and somewhat awkward, oblivious to the turmoil beneath his calm exterior, but by night, David becomes something else entirely. He uses his spider abilities to track down the remnants of the illegal experiments that cost him everything. Each mission is fraught with danger and often ends in comical mishaps, a testament to his ongoing struggle to master his powers. A day at the office. The next morning, David sits at his cluttered desk, typing away at his computer. The fluorescent lights above hum softly, casting a sterile glow over the office. His coworker, Jenna, approaches with a stack of papers. "Hey David, could you take a look at these error logs? They've been acting up all morning," she says, dropping the papers onto his desk. "Sure thing," David replies, forcing a smile. As Jenna walks away, he catches a glimpse of his reflection in the monitor, a stark reminder of the night that changed his life. His phone buzzes with a new message: found a lead on Krieg's whereabouts. "Meet me at the usual spot tonight." It's from his only contact in the underground network seeking justice, someone he trusts implicitly, though trust is a fragile thing for David these days. The revelation: after his shift, David changes into a dark hoodie and heads to a secluded rooftop where his contact, Marcus, awaits. Marcus is a former lab assistant who turned against Krieg after witnessing the horrors firsthand. "Got a name?" Marcus begins, handing David a photo. It's Dr. Augustus Krieg, now posing as the CEO of Krieg Biotech, a legitimate biotech corporation with a sterling public reputation. He's expanded his operations. We need to find out where he's hiding next. David studies the photo, recognizing the smug expression on Krieg's face. "Time to reel him in," he says, determination hardening his features, training and missteps back home, David practices his web-slinging in his small apartment. The space is cluttered with gadgets and research notes, remnants of his parents' work and his own attempts to understand his abilities. He watches tutorials online, trying to refine his control over the webbing. "Okay, David, focus," he mutters, extending his wrists. A thin strand of web shoots out, but it tangles around a lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. Frustrated, he kicks it free, nearly tripping over his own feet in the process that he sits down heavily, rubbing his temples. "This isn't easy, but I can't give up. Not after what they did." The first attempt the next night, armed with newfound determination, David sets out to infiltrate a minor facility rumored to be connected to Krieg Biotech. He uses his webbing to scale the building, landing silently on the rooftop. Inside, the corridors are dimly lit, echoing with the distant sounds of machinery. As he navigates through the building, he encounters security measures, cameras, motion sensors, and patrolling guards. His lack of experience becomes apparent when he accidentally dislodges a web strand, causing a nearby pipe to rattle ominously. Not good, he thinks, ducking into a storage room to regain his composure. Inside the room, David tries to hack into the facility's database using his tech skills. Just as he's about to access the information, a security guard rounds the corner, shining a flashlight directly at him. Panic sets in. Without thinking, David fires a web strand at the guard, but instead of ensnaring him effectively, the web sticks to the ceiling, pulling David off balance. He crashes into a stack of boxes, sending them tumbling and creating a noisy mess. The guard rushes forward, but David uses his agility to dodge, though not gracefully. In his desperation, he lashes out again, this time managing to web the guard's face, momentarily blinding him. Taking advantage of the chaos, David escapes, albeit not without leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Backlash and reflection. Breathing heavily on his way back to his apartment, David reflects on his first attempt. It didn't go as planned, but he's one step closer to Krieg. The reality of his mission settles in. This path is dangerous, and he's still learning. He sits down, staring at a wall covered in maps and photographs of Krieg and his associates. Each connection he uncovers fuels his determination, but the weight of his mission begins to take its toll. Sleep becomes elusive as he grapples with the duality of his existence, the ordinary man and the vigilante seeking justice. Meeting Marissa a few days later, David receives another message from Marcus: "Meet me tonight." New intel on Krieg. At the rendezvous point, a dimly lit cafe tucked away in an alley, David meets Marissa Hayes, an investigative journalist known for her relentless pursuit of the truth. She's been tracking Krieg's activities independently, and their paths have now converged. "David, right?" Marissa asks, extending her hand. "I hear you've been digging into Krieg Biotech." "Yeah," he replies cautiously. "We need to combine our efforts. There's more to this than just one rogue scientist." Marissa nods, pulling out a folder filled with documents. "I've uncovered evidence of multiple illegal experiments tied to Krieg. If we can expose this, we can bring him down for good." David feels a spark of hope. "Let's do it." Planning the next move together, they pore over the documents, mapping out Krieg's network. The more they uncover, the deeper the conspiracy seems to run, funding, cover-ups, and a trail of victims, all pointing back to Krieg Biotech. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Marissa suggests. "Expose their financial records, publicize their illegal activities. The more people know, the harder it becomes for them to operate." David agrees, but his mind is already racing with ideas for direct action. "I can infiltrate their labs, gather more evidence firsthand. Hit them from the inside." Marissa looks at him thoughtfully. "We need both approaches. Your skills and my resources can complement each other. But be careful, Krieg is dangerous, and he won't hesitate to eliminate threats." A glimmer of hope as they finalize their plans. David feels a sense of purpose he hasn't felt since before the accident. For the first time since losing his family, he's not alone in his quest for justice. Together, they form a formidable team, each bringing their strengths to the table. That night, David stands atop his apartment building, looking out over the city skyline. The rain has ceased, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. He shoots a web to the rooftop of a nearby building, launching himself into the air with newfound confidence. This is just the beginning, he whispers to himself, determination burning in his eyes. They won't get away with this. As he swings through the city, the first part of his journey concludes, setting the stage for the challenges and confrontations yet to come. David swung through the city with a newfound sense of purpose, the cool night air brushing against his face as he navigated the maze of rooftops. Each swing brought him closer to Krieg Biotech, the heart of the conspiracy that had shattered his life. Below, the city pulsed with lights and sounds, oblivious to the silent battle unfolding above. Back at his apartment, David and Marissa pored over the documents they had gathered. The evidence was damning. Contracts, financial records, and internal memos all pointed to a vast network of illegal experiments funded by Krieg Biotech. It was clear that Krieg wasn't working alone. There were higher-ups, influential figures who protected him, ensuring his operations remained hidden in the shadows. We need to find out who else is involved, Marissa said, her eyes scanning a particularly incriminating email thread. These funds aren't just going towards experiments. They're laundering money, bribing officials. Krieg has connections everywhere. David nodded, feeling the weight of their mission pressing down on him. If we can expose these connections, we can dismantle his entire operation. But we need more concrete evidence, something that ties him directly to the experiments that gave me these powers. Marissa tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. I've heard rumors about a new facility they've been developing. Supposedly, it's where they're planning to scale up their experiments. If we can get inside, we might find the proof we need. David felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the break they'd been waiting for. I can infiltrate the facility. Use my abilities to get in and gather the evidence. But I'll need your help to cover our tracks and ensure we get out safely. Marissa looked up, determination shining in her eyes. I'll coordinate everything from here. We'll have security blind spots, data backups, whatever you need. Just be careful. That night, David prepared for the mission. He double-checked his web shooters, ensuring they were loaded and functional. His apartment, once a cluttered space of research notes and gadgets, now felt like a strategic command center. He reviewed the layout of the new facility, memorizing entry points and security protocols. As he approached the perimeter of Krieg Biotech's newest facility, David felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The building was a state-of-the-art complex, surrounded by high walls and armed guards patrolling the grounds. He took a deep breath, focusing on his training. This time, he wouldn't let his inexperience hold him back. Using his enhanced agility, David scaled the wall with ease, his web strands anchoring him securely as he pulled himself up. He landed silently on the rooftop, crouching in the shadows to observe the security measures. Cameras scanned the area methodically, their red lights piercing the darkness. He waited for the right moment, timing his movements to avoid detection. With a graceful leap, David descended to a ventilation shaft, slipping inside just as a guard passed below. The confined space was tight, but his spider-like flexibility allowed him to maneuver effortlessly. Crawling through the ducts, he felt the tension rise with each passing second, every sound amplified in the silent corridor. After what felt like an eternity, he emerged into the main laboratory. The room was filled with advanced equipment and scientists huddled over their work. In the center stood a massive containment unit, glowing ominously with a faint, pulsating light. David approached cautiously, his senses heightened. This had to be where the next phase of the experiments was taking place. He began to document everything, taking photos and collecting samples of the substances being used. His heart pounded as he realized the potential of what he was witnessing. This was the key to understanding and possibly controlling his own abilities. But before he could gather enough evidence, an alarm blared, and the room was flooded with red lights. Intruder alert, a voice crackled over the intercom. panic surged through David. He had been discovered. Reacting swiftly, he fired a web strand at a nearby ventilation panel, pulling it open and escaping through the shattered glass. Alarms continued to wail as guards scrambled to respond to the breach. David raced through the corridors, using his webbing to swing across gaps and scale walls. He could hear the shouts and footsteps of the security team closing in on him. His mind raced, calculating his escape route. He needed to reach the rooftop before they could trap him inside. As he neared the exit, a guard blocked his path, a stern expression on his face. "Freeze! You're not going anywhere." David's instincts kicked in. He launched a web at the guard's face, momentarily blinding him. The guard staggered back, disoriented, giving David the precious seconds he needed to slip past. He sprinted towards the window, throwing himself through just as the guards closed in behind him. Breathing heavily, he swung across to the adjacent rooftop, landing deftly. He glanced around, ensuring he wasn't being followed, and then pulled out his phone. "Marissa, I've got it. The evidence is secure. I'm on my way back." "Good job," Marissa replied, her voice steady. "Start heading to the extraction point. I've arranged for a getaway car waiting a few blocks away." David nodded, knowing he had to move quickly. He descended the building using his webbing, avoiding the remaining guards and slipping into the shadows. As he reached the street, the cool night air greeted him, the city's sounds masking his presence. He spotted the black sedan parked discreetly and made his way to it, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. Inside the car, Marissa was already there, reviewing the footage they had captured. "This is huge," she said, eyes fixed on the screen. "We have everything we need to bring Krieg down." David sank into the passenger seat, exhaustion washing over him. "Let's make sure it all gets out there." As the car sped away, David couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had taken a significant step towards exposing the truth, but he knew the battle was far from over. Krieg Biotech would retaliate, and the deeper they delved, the more dangerous the path became. Over the next few weeks, David and Marissa worked tirelessly to compile their findings. Marissa leveraged her connections in the media, ensuring that their story would reach the right people. David continued his nocturnal missions, using his spider abilities to gather additional evidence and stay one step ahead of Krieg's growing defenses. Their collaboration deepened their understanding of the conspiracy. They uncovered multiple layers of corruption, from high-ranking officials to influential business leaders, all entwined in Krieg's web of deceit. Each discovery brought them closer to the truth, but also heightened the risks they faced. One evening, as David was returning from a mission, he found his apartment door ajar. A chill ran down his spine as he cautiously stepped inside, the familiar scent of his home now tinged with an unfamiliar tension. His eyes quickly adjusted to the dim light, revealing signs of a struggle: scattered papers, broken furniture, and the unmistakable presence of someone else in his space. "Marissa," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. No response came. He moved silently, searching for any sign of his partner. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Two masked men, their intentions clear. "Hands up," one of them ordered, brandishing a weapon. David's mind raced, assessing his options. He couldn't let them take Marissa. She was integral to their mission. Using his enhanced reflexes, he dodged the first strike, narrowly avoiding a blow that could have been fatal. With a swift motion, he unleashed a web strand, entangling one of the assailants and pulling him into the air. The second attacker hesitated, momentarily confused by the unexpected resistance. "Get out of here," David growled, his eyes blazing with determination. The intruders exchanged a glance before retreating into the darkness, leaving David alone with his racing heart. Breathing heavily, he searched the apartment once more, finding Marissa huddled in the corner, shaken but unharmed. "They were looking for you," she whispered, clutching a blanket around her. David knelt beside her, concern etched on his face. "We need to be more careful. They know we're onto them." Marissa nodded, pulling out a small device. "I've been tracking their communications. They're tightening the net around us." We have to move our operations to a more secure location. Determined not to let fear derail their mission, David agreed. They decided to set up a new base of operations in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes and potential threats. The journey there was tense, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them with each passing mile. At the warehouse, they established a temporary command center. Maps, documents, and electronic equipment were spread out across makeshift tables, creating a war room of sorts. Marissa connected her laptop to a series of monitors, displaying live feeds and encrypted communications. "We need to anticipate Krieg's next move," Marissa said, her eyes scanning the data. "He won't sit back and let us expose him without a fight. We have to stay ahead." David nodded, his mind already formulating strategies. "We need to disrupt their operations from multiple angles. Hit their financial assets, expose their illegal experiments, and create chaos within their ranks. The more pressure we apply, the harder it will be for them to maintain control." As they delved deeper into their plans, an uneasy alliance formed between them and a group of like-minded individuals who had also been affected by Krieg's actions. Former employees, victims of the experiments, and even a few insiders willing to risk everything for the truth joined their cause. Together, they became a formidable force, each person bringing unique skills and insights to the table. One member, Lena, a former security expert for Krieg Biotech, provided invaluable knowledge about the corporation's inner workings. Her understanding of security protocols and surveillance systems allowed them to navigate the labyrinthine defenses with greater ease. Another, Eli, a hacker with a knack for bypassing even the most sophisticated firewalls, helped them access restricted data and communicate securely. With their team in place, David felt a surge of optimism. They were no longer just two individuals fighting against a powerful adversary, they had become a unified front, each member dedicated to the same goal. The warehouse buzzed with activity as they coordinated their efforts, each task bringing them closer to dismantling Krieg's empire. However, with every victory came increased danger. Krieg Biotech was ruthless, and its leaders were determined to protect their interests at all costs. David could sense the tension growing, the threat of retaliation looming over every move they made. One night, as David was patrolling the city, he received an urgent call from Marissa. "David, we've got a situation. One of our sources has been compromised. They have information that could blow the entire operation if it falls into the wrong hands." David's heart sank. "Where are they? We need to secure that information before it's too late." Marissa provided the location, a rundown motel on the edge of town where their source, Tom, was staying. David raced through the city, using his webbing to traverse the urban landscape with speed and efficiency. As he arrived at the motel, he spotted Tom nervously pacing in his room, clearly on edge. "Tom, it's me," David whispered, sliding the door open silently. "We need to get you out of here. Now." Tom glanced around frantically before nodding. "They're coming. They know I have the data." Before David could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway. He motioned for Tom to follow, pulling him into a hidden corner. As the intruders entered, David prepared to confront them, his body tense and ready for action. The attackers, recognizing David, attempted to overpower him, but his spider abilities gave him the upper hand. He moved with lightning speed, webbing one assailant to the wall and disarming the other with a precise strike. Within moments, the threat was neutralized, and the hallway fell silent once more. Breathing heavily, David helped Tom to his feet. "We need to move, now. Marissa will cover your tracks." As they escaped the motel, David couldn't shake the feeling that Krieg was closing in on them. Each victory seemed to escalate the stakes, turning their mission into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. But despite the mounting challenges, David remained resolute. The memory of his family and the promise he made to himself fueled his determination to see this through to the end. Back at the warehouse, the team regrouped, assessing the damage and planning their next move. Tom, now safe, provided crucial information about a hidden research facility deep within Krieg Biotech's domain. This facility was rumored to house the most advanced and dangerous experiments, the key to understanding the full extent of Krieg's ambitions. "We need to get inside," Lena stated, her eyes steely with resolve. "This is where it all began. If we can expose what they're truly capable of, we can cripple their operations for good." David agreed, knowing that infiltrating the research facility would be their most significant challenge yet. The team spent days preparing, gathering intelligence, and devising a detailed plan. They knew the risks involved, but the potential rewards outweighed the dangers. The night before the operation, David found himself alone on the rooftop, gazing out over the city. The weight of their mission pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he felt a sense of camaraderie and purpose that he hadn't experienced since before the accident. "We're doing this for everyone they've hurt," Marissa's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. She stood beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're almost there." David turned to her, a determined smile on his face. "Together, we can bring them down." As dawn approached, the team made their final preparations. Equipped with advanced gadgets, secure communication devices, and an unwavering resolve, they set out for the research facility. The journey was fraught with tension, each member acutely aware of the risks involved. They moved swiftly and silently, their movements synchronized through careful planning and unspoken trust. Arriving at the facility, they surveyed the perimeter, noting the heightened security measures and advanced surveillance systems. Lena took the lead, using her expertise to disable the outer defenses while Eli hacked into the security network, providing them with real-time information and access codes. Inside, the facility was a maze of sterile corridors and high-tech laboratories. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint scent of chemicals. The team moved with purpose, each step bringing them closer to the heart of Krieg's operations. As they delved deeper, they encountered increasing resistance. Guards became more vigilant, and the security systems more complex. David's spider abilities proved invaluable, allowing him to navigate the vertical spaces and tight corners with ease. He used his webbing to create shortcuts and distract the guards, his agility and speed turning him into a shadowy presence that was both elusive and formidable. Finally, they reached the main research lab, a vast, high-security area at the center of the facility. The door was reinforced, guarded by multiple layers of security. Lena and Eli worked together to bypass the remaining defenses, their efforts culminating in a satisfying click as the door unlocked. Inside, the lab was a sprawling expanse of cutting-edge technology and experimental equipment. At the center stood a massive containment unit, pulsating with the same eerie light that had haunted David's memories. This was the epicenter of Krieg's most dangerous experiments, the source of the power that had transformed him. As they approached the containment unit, a figure emerged from the shadows: Dr. Augustus Krieg, flanked by his personal security detail. His presence was commanding, his eyes cold and calculating as he regarded the intruders. "So, you've finally arrived," Krieg said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I must commend you on your persistence. But you're too late. The next phase is already in motion." David stepped forward, his anger and determination clear. "It ends now, Krieg. Your reign of terror is over." Krieg laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the lab. "You think you can stop progress? Humanity's evolution is inevitable. You're merely a setback, an unfortunate casualty of advancement." Marissa held up the evidence they had gathered, her voice unwavering. "Your experiments have caused nothing but suffering. It's time to expose the truth and hold you accountable." Krieg's expression darkened. "You're naive if you think you can bring me down. My influence reaches far beyond this facility. You're just one man, David. You can't comprehend the scale of what you're up against." Before David could respond, Krieg gestured, and the room was filled with armed guards. A fierce battle ensued, the team fighting valiantly against the onslaught. David's spider abilities were pushed to their limits as he swung through the lab, webbing up guards and using his strength to fend off attacks. Lena and Eli provided tactical support, taking down enemies with precision, while Marissa worked to secure the evidence and communicate with the outside world. Amid the chaos, Krieg activated a control panel, initiating a countdown for the release of a new, even more dangerous serum. The clock was ticking, and David knew they had to act quickly to prevent another catastrophe. "David, we need to stop the serum release," Marissa shouted over the din, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to override the system. David nodded, his focus unwavering. He engaged Krieg in a brutal confrontation, the two locked in a battle of wills and strength. Krieg's arrogance and overconfidence were his downfall, as David's relentless determination and superior agility gave him the upper hand. With a final, decisive strike, David incapacitated Krieg, ending the immediate threat. As the countdown reached its final seconds, Marissa successfully halted the serum release, preventing further devastation. The room fell silent, the danger averted thanks to their combined efforts. Breathing heavily, the team regrouped, the weight of their victory settling in. Marissa quickly transmitted the evidence to trusted media outlets, ensuring that the world would see the true extent of Krieg Biotech's crimes. David looked around at his team, pride and gratitude swelling in his chest. "We did it," he said, a rare smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "We actually did it." But even as they celebrated their hard-fought victory, David couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Krieg Biotech's influence was vast, and dismantling one facility was just the first step in a much larger battle. The fight for justice would continue, driven by the memory of his family and the unwavering support of his allies. As dawn broke over the city, David stood on the rooftop once more, the first light of day casting a golden hue over the skyline. He felt a sense of closure, knowing that he had taken significant steps towards fulfilling his quest for revenge and justice. But he also understood that his journey was far from over. With Marissa by his side and a team of dedicated individuals backing him, David was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The spider within him had evolved from a symbol of vengeance into a beacon of hope, weaving a new path towards a future free from the shadows of Krieg Biotech. As he swung into the morning light, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. The city stretched out before him, a vast expanse of possibilities and challenges. He knew that as long as there were those who sought to exploit and harm, he would be there to stop them, his web a testament to his resilience and unyielding spirit. The spider's revenge had just begun. David swung through the quiet streets, the wind rushing past him as his thoughts raced. Krieg Biotech's empire had been dealt a major blow, but the satisfaction of the victory was fleeting. The media exposure, the arrests, the dismantling of some of their darkest facilities, none of it felt like enough. He could feel it, that gnawing sense of unfinished business. He hadn't done this just for revenge. There were still too many people out there who had suffered, too many victims whose lives had been ruined by the same twisted experiments that had warped his own existence. The sun was rising, painting the skyline in hues of pink and gold. For a brief moment, David allowed himself to feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. But then the reality of their situation set in again. Krieg Biotech had fallen, but there were still other shadowy figures who had funded and protected the corporation's work. The network was vast, and as long as those at the top were free, the cycle would continue. David had made a promise to his family that he would make those responsible pay. He wasn't about to let that promise slip through his fingers now. They might have won a battle, but the war was far from over. Back at the warehouse, the team was already hard at work. They had to move fast, use the momentum they'd built. Marissa was at her computer, eyes glued to a live feed of breaking news. The headlines were flooded with the aftermath of their successful operation. Images of Krieg's arrest and the destruction of his labs were splashed across the screens, but Marissa wasn't celebrating. She was tracking something much more important. "We've got a problem," she said, glancing up at David as he entered the room. "Someone's moving to fill Krieg's shoes. The backers behind the biotech operation, the ones that haven't been exposed yet, they're consolidating power." David's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "I'm still digging. But I've found something." a high-ranking official from one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, and a string of communications that suggest they're moving quickly to take over Krieg's assets. David gritted his teeth. This was exactly what he had feared. Krieg was just the face of a much bigger, much more dangerous organization. And if this person or group took over, it could mean the same twisted experiments would continue, maybe even on a larger scale. He had to stop them before they could get any further. Where are we going next? David asked, his tone flat and resolute. Marissa pulled up a new set of coordinates. I've been tracking a high-profile meeting. They're convening at an undisclosed location today. I think it's a power shift. If we can get in, get eyes on who's involved, we can start cutting off the head of this new operation. David's mind raced, processing the information. He'd been hoping for a break, some way to connect the dots and finish what he'd started. This was it. The moment had arrived. They won't make it easy, he said, more to himself than to Marissa. He couldn't afford to underestimate anyone anymore. Yeah, Marissa replied. But we've got an advantage. They don't know we're onto them. David suited up, his mind focused on the task ahead. The pressure of the situation, the danger they were about to face, it was all too familiar. It made him feel alive in a way that he hadn't in months. He was no longer just a man with a vendetta. He was a force, a weapon that had been forged by the same system he was now trying to destroy. His spider abilities had made him stronger, faster, and more resilient. But it was the vengeance that drove him, the burning desire to make them all pay. He tightened his gloves, checked his webbing, and looked over at Marissa. She gave him a determined nod before returning to her computer. Her fingers flew over the keys as she coordinated the next steps. This mission was as much hers as it was his. We're moving out in 5 minutes, Marissa said, closing down her screen and grabbing her gear. The meeting was taking place in a remote, heavily guarded estate on the outskirts of the city. Satellite imagery revealed a sprawling mansion, surrounded by tall iron gates, surveillance cameras at every corner, and armed guards patrolling the grounds. It was a fortress, a perfect hideaway for the kind of people David was hunting. He arrived at the location just as the sky was darkening, the estate bathed in an eerie twilight. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. David crouched low on a rooftop across the street, his eyes scanning the perimeter. The mansion's security system was sophisticated, no easy task to bypass. But that was where his skills came in. He fired a web at the edge of the roof, pulling himself closer to the mansion. The air was cool against his face, but his mind was sharp. He had trained for this, planned for it. Every inch of this estate was an obstacle to overcome. But David had learned to think like a spider, find the weak points, the vulnerabilities, and exploit them. He crept closer, taking care to avoid the cameras. He could hear voices from inside the mansion, muffled but distinct. The meeting was underway. Every second that passed brought him closer to uncovering who was behind the new operation. He couldn't afford to wait much longer. David scaled the side of the building, effortlessly slipping through a vent and into the mansion's interior. The cool, sterile air of the hallway was a stark contrast to the tension in his chest. His senses were on high alert, his every movement calculated. As he moved down the hall, he avoided the staff and guards, who were clearly unaware of his presence. He had become a shadow, a fleeting presence in the midst of their controlled chaos. Finally, he reached the grand meeting room. From the hallway, he could see through a narrow crack in the door. The room was lit by a massive chandelier, casting a soft glow over a long table surrounded by powerful figures. Men and women in tailored suits, their expressions grim and serious. Business magnates, pharmaceutical CEOs, political leaders. The elite. At the head of the table, a familiar figure sat. David's heart skipped a beat when he saw the man, the one responsible for funding the early days of the experiments that had changed his life. Nathaniel Hale. A man whose wealth and influence stretched far beyond anything David had imagined. Hale had remained in the shadows while Krieg ran the operations, but it was clear now that he was taking over. This was the puppet master. David's hand tightened around his web shooter. This was it. Hale was the one who had funded the experiments, the one who had profited from them. The one who had ruined David's life. And now, Hale was taking his seat at the head of a new empire. He couldn't let him escape this time. David quickly scanned the rest of the room, noting the others in attendance. There was Dr. Evelyn Moore, a brilliant but morally bankrupt scientist who had overseen the genetic modification experiments. Then there was Julian Price, a high-ranking government official who had been on Hale's payroll for years. These were the people who had enabled the cruelty, the exploitation. These were the ones David had to take down. He readied himself. There were no more chances, no more time to waste. His mission was clear. As David prepared to strike, a door on the far side of the room opened, and a new figure entered. A woman, tall and elegant, with long black hair that flowed like liquid silk. Her presence commanded attention, and she didn't even flinch as the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "The future is ours to shape, and I intend to see it through." David's blood ran cold. He recognized her. It was Elena Kovac, a ruthless businesswoman who had once been one of Hale's closest associates. Elena had been involved in some of the earliest phases of the project, but she had kept her involvement carefully hidden. She was supposed to be out of the picture, a relic of the past, and yet here she was, taking control of the operation with a chilling certainty. David's mind raced. Kovac's sudden reappearance meant one thing: the stakes had just been raised. Hale wasn't just planning to expand, he was preparing for something bigger. And Kovac was going to be the one to execute his vision. Together, they were unstoppable, but David wasn't about to let them have their way. Not after everything they had done. In that moment, a plan formed in David's mind. He didn't need to fight them all at once. He didn't need to take them down in a single strike. No, he could use his powers, his ability to slip in and out of the shadows, to turn their own tactics against them. He fired a web, hitting the chandelier above them, swinging silently across the room as it swayed beneath his weight. He landed behind the group, his presence still unseen. He could hear them talking, discussing their plans to expand the experiments, perhaps even make them global. And David could feel the anger bubbling up inside him, but he kept it in check. He had learned to be patient. He waited. His senses alert, and then, as Kovac reached for the plans to the next phase of the project, David struck. With a burst of speed, he unleashed a web that entangled the entire table, catching them by surprise. The force of it sent documents flying, the suddenness of the attack catching everyone off guard. The elite of the room were thrown into disarray as David swung from the ceiling, taking out the guards one by. David swung gracefully from the chandelier, his movements fluid and precise. The sudden chaos he'd unleashed sent the room spiraling into disarray. Papers fluttered through the air, and the elite members scrambled to regain their composure. Guards rushed to respond, but David was already a blur of motion, weaving through the room with his enhanced agility. He aimed a web at one of the guards, pulling him into a nearby pillar with a swift motion. The guard struggled, but the webbing held firm, rendering him immobile. David moved to the next target, using his strength to lift another guard effortlessly before webbing him to the ceiling. The room was a whirlwind of action, with David methodically taking down each adversary without hesitation. Nathaniel Hale, still at the head of the table, tried to maintain some semblance of authority amidst the chaos. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the pressure. David approached Hale, his eyes burning with determination. "This ends now, Hale. No more experiments. No more lives ruined." Before Hale could respond, Elena Kovac stepped forward, her demeanor unshaken. "You think you've won, David? This is just the beginning. There are others like us, others who believe in progress over ethics." David's grip tightened on his web shooter. "You're wrong, Elena. Progress without humanity is nothing. It's time to dismantle everything you've built." With a swift motion, David unleashed a final, powerful web strand that enveloped both Hale and Kovac, pulling them toward him. The two men struggled, but the webbing held them firmly in place. David stood tall, breathing heavily, his mission reaching its climax. Marissa, Lena, Eli, and the rest of the team moved in, securing the remaining guards and ensuring that the key players were apprehended. Marissa swiftly connected her device to the facility's mainframe, initiating a live feed to broadcast the incriminating evidence they had gathered. The screens around the room flickered to life, displaying the full extent of Krieg Biotech's atrocities and Hale's corrupt dealings. As the evidence streamed across the screens, security footage, financial records, and testimonies filled the room, leaving no doubt about the depth of the conspiracy. The attendees were left speechless, their power stripped away by the undeniable truth. David looked around at his team, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. "We did it," he said quietly, though his voice held a mix of relief and exhaustion. Marissa approached him, her expression softening. "It's over, David. You've avenged your family and countless others." But David knew better. It's not just about revenge anymore. It's about ensuring this never happens again. With Hale and Kovac in custody and the evidence exposed to the world, Krieg Biotech's operations crumbled. The media frenzy that followed ensured that no remnants of the corrupt network could easily resurface. Authorities launched investigations, leading to the dismantling of other affiliated organizations and the prosecution of those involved. In the days that followed, David found himself at the center of a movement. Support poured in from survivors of similar experiments, families seeking justice, and even former employees of Krieg Biotech who wanted to make amends. The team expanded, incorporating more individuals who had been wronged by the same system. David's life began to stabilize, the weight of his past slowly lifting as he embraced his role as a protector rather than just a seeker of vengeance. He continued to work alongside Marissa, Lena, Eli, and the others, using their combined skills to monitor and prevent any future attempts at unethical experimentation. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, David stood on the rooftop of his apartment building, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The city below buzzed with life, unaware of the silent guardian watching over them. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that his family's legacy would live on through the justice he had fought so hard to achieve. Marissa joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "You did good, David. Really good." He took the cup, nodding appreciatively. "Couldn't have done it without all of you." They stood in comfortable silence, the bond between them strengthened by their shared struggles and victories. David realized that his spider abilities, once a symbol of his pain, had become a beacon of hope for many. As night fell, David prepared to swing into action once more, his web shooting out seamlessly as he launched himself into the sky. He glanced back at Marissa, who waved before turning her attention back to her work. With a final glance at the city he had sworn to protect, David disappeared into the darkness, a silent promise lingering in the air. As long as there were those who sought to harm the innocent, the spider's revenge would continue, ensuring that justice was served and that the shadows could never hide the truth. The spider's revenge had found its balance between vengeance and justice, setting the stage for a future where David Wren stood as a guardian, ever vigilant and unwavering in his mission to protect those who could not protect themselves.